Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is racism, specifically about being called a racist. I'm getting tired of being called a racist, an epithet hurled at me simply because I am an unabashed lover of Israel. The term, the word, the slur, racist, has become an automatic response for a large swath of America. It has become an automatic invective. One can be a liberal, small l, in so many ways, but loving Israel makes you a racist. And it's not just limited to loving and standing up for Israel. Non-male members of this knee-jerk movement call all men sexist and or racist. They call all white people oppressors and or privileged. I consider it a lazy person's way of addressing issues and trying to understand the thoughts, opinions, and behaviors of those whose thoughts, opinions, and behaviors do not mirror yours. Just pick a label and pin it on the other. We have entered a new era in U.S. politics. You see it when watching cable news outlets. You hear it not only when attending rallies and protests, but also school board and local library meetings. It's an automatic condemnation of entire swaths of U.S. voters and the population. Online, it is gruesome. A new vocabulary has sprung up to accommodate the movement. There is a strategy of doxing, searching for and making public identifying information about a person through the internet for nefarious reasons. And there's canceling, used on social media when you dislike someone or something and try to make them irrelevant people. Entire movements, like the Republican Party, has been canceled. Think about it, and you'll realize how counterproductive and futile that is. The gubernatorial elections in the states of Virginia and New Jersey should have been a foreshadowing of these things to come. It was in a shoo-in for Democrats, both of these elections, but the end result, woke, which is a holier-than-thou attitude, which includes staying alert to people and angry about perceived injustice, won't work. Woke will, according to several polls, probably turn around and continue to hurt liberal causes at the voting booth. But those who compose woke message do not seem to be concerned about that. They are digging in. They're not pivoting. Rather than trying to work with those not aligned with you in today's woke world, woke leaders believe they are right and as a result must attack those they disagree with. And anyone who does not agree with the entire A to Z script of woke is the enemy. And that's how Israel turned into a standout. It is why Israel turned into the problem. I'm not a Republican. I'm also not a Democrat. I'm a registered independent. The world has changed, and that is where I now feel most comfortable. I'm a centrist because I am a Maimonidean. I love the Rambam. I believe that the center is the best place for everyone. I believe that the center allows the best solutions, the best thinking. I also believe that disagreements make for interesting conversation. They certainly used to. But those were the days when we discussed and not just labeled people. I'm in the minority, and I know that. Anyone who knows me knows that I am not indecisive. I'm not wishy-washy. That's not why I'm in the center. But politics has become so fraught with anger, has moved civil disagreements to disputes, that I share my leanings only with a select few. To win an election, the Democratic election, everywhere in the world, the parties must grab swing voters. Those are the people in the middle, and they are becoming fewer and fewer. In U.S. politics, I firmly believe that the parties, both Democrats and Republicans, must have a strong pro-Israel plank in their platform. And on the part of voters, it is simply bad strategy to alienate any party when it comes to Israel. Israel and the Jewish community are too important to be reduced to a party line. This was, by the way, one of the big mistakes that Netanyahu made. He alienated too many Democrats. In real terms, that means that there must be a resurgence of proud, card-carrying Democrats who love Israel. It does not matter that for years, these self-identified liberals fought tooth and nail to advance liberal causes. But it doesn't work that way nowadays because they are Zionist and because some are also Jewishly traditional and Jewishly observant. They are outsiders, even oppressors. Actually, in the woke left, observant Jews are deemed Neanderthals. Israel must and used to unite the Jewish community, and non-Jews supported Israel. Liberals and conservatives, old and young, rich and poor, loving Israel was a very large tent. Only Neturei Karta was outside the tent, a small, unimportant group that made the news because it was a situation of man bites dog, or should I say person bites dog. They were newsworthy because it was expected that everyone, especially every Jew, would support Israel. They were the exception and hence in the news. Man bites dog. Israel is not perfect. The Jewish state has made mistakes and will continue to make mistakes. But the Jewish state is the homeland for the Jewish people. It is the protector of Jews when no one else will stand up to protect us. Israel is in the heart and soul of the Jewish creativity and productivity for everyone who's productive. There's no question. Call me a racist. It's annoying. But I'll wear that title with pride because today it means that I stand up for what I believe. I believe in Israel. That belief will never change. I hope those who call me racists will. Coming up, points of view. First up is a column from the Wall Street Journal. It appeared on May 12, 2022. It's titled, California Parents Say No to Anti-Semitic Ethnic Studies. It also has a very long subtitle. Activists are pushing curricula that portray Israel as a settler state founded on genocide. The column is co-written by Lori Lowenthal Marcus and Jesse M. Fried. Ms. Marcus is the legal director of the Deborah Project and the lead counsel in Concerned Jewish Parents and Teachers of LA versus Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Consortium. Mr. Fried is a professor at Harvard Law School and the chairman of the Deborah Project's board of directors. This is how they begin. A group of Jewish public school parents and teachers filed a federal lawsuit Thursday challenging the adoption of the anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist curricular materials in Los Angeles public schools. Last year, California Governor Gavin Newsom signed a law requiring public school students in the state to complete a course in ethnic studies to graduate from high school. He said it was needed because students deserve to see themselves in their studies, and they must understand our nation's full history if we expect them to one day build a more just society. But the ethnic studies movement has never been about representation or justice. A creature of the 1960s radical left-wing activism, ethnic studies was from the start about attacking U.S. capitalism and Zionism. The consortium, which disseminates teaching materials lifted directly from the radical anti-Israel websites, rejects the idea that all cultures should be studied. It asserts that ethnic studies is about only four groups: Native Americans, Black Americans, Chicano, Latinos, and Asian American Pacific Islanders. That last group includes Arabs from the Middle East, but not Jews, who've lived in the same region for millennia. The consortium's materials, many of which have been taken offline in recent months, are filled with attacks on Jews and the Jewish state. They deny that Jews are indigenous to the Middle East and teach that Israel is a colonialist and settler state founded through genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid. They falsely define Judaism, teaching that Zionism is distinct from Judaism and that Zionism isn't a Jewish religious belief, but an invention of the 19th century. The entire plan, as the authors so cogently present, is purely a way of maintain the political correct aura as they engage in the acts of hating Israel, hating Jews, and hating people who love Israel. The authors conclude this column by explaining what they hope to achieve. Here is their conclusion. The lawsuit has two aims: removal of teaching materials denouncing the plaintiff's sincerely held religious beliefs, and public disclosure of all ethnic studies materials in Los Angeles public schools. The parents and teachers we represent seek public disclosure of what is actually being taught with public money in public schools and an end to taxpayer-funded anti-Semitic teaching materials. Jewish teachers have the right to a workplace, and the Jewish parents have to a public school for their children where governmental paid teachers do not denounce their homeland, characterize their people as genocidal criminals, or disparage their religious beliefs. If the Liberated Ethnic Studies Model Curriculum Consortium prevails in California, it is likely to be deployed elsewhere. Israel and Jews are only the first of the left's perceived ideological enemies to be denounced on the public dime. If proponents of the curriculum aren't stopped, other enemies and their denunciations are likely to follow. This is an excellent piece. Jews are standing up and calling leftists racist, and they are very well represented. Next up is a column from AFP, Agence France Presse. It is unauthored. I would normally stay away from unauthored material, but this specific column raises a very important question. The column appears on May 8th, 2022. It's entitled, Rebuild or Resist, Hamas's Dilemma Year After Gaza War. It is also subtitled, While Gazans who have seen little done to rebuild the Strip after May 2001 fighting prefer economic rehabilitation, Hamas leaders abroad opt for ideological resistance. Meanwhile, buildings and roads remain in rubble. Another very long subtitle. This column asks an essential question. Is Hamas interested in rebuilding or simply attacking Israel? This is how the column begins. A year after its devastating war with Israel, the Palestinian Islamic movement, Hamas, is faced with a dilemma: to keep up the armed struggle or to lay low and reconstruct the Gaza Strip. Now comes a little background, which the column actually does very, very well. It continues, on May 10, 2021, weeks of clashes between Israeli forces and Palestinian in the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in East Jerusalem culminated in an all-out conflict. A barrage of rockets was fired from the Gaza Strip, with some projectiles hitting Israeli cities, the rest intercepted. That same evening, the Israeli Air Force pounded Gaza. What followed was 11 days of war that leveled parts of Gaza, killing 260 Palestinians, including many fighters and children. 14 died in Israel, including a soldier and 2 minors. More than 1,000 housing units and buildings in Gaza were damaged or completely destroyed by the Israeli bombardment. But a year later, the reconstruction effort has barely taken off. Gaza City's destroyed towers have not been rebuilt, and many roads are still in dire need of repair. This is the crux of the question. Hamas says that their priority is to rebuild. They are getting money to rebuild, but they are actually reloading. Hamas is acquiring weapons and restocking their caches of rockets and missiles. And this is how the AFP column actually concludes. Hamas is divided. The leadership in Gaza is trying to avoid further escalation and is encouraged by the decision of the current Israeli government to give more to Gaza as long as Gaza remains quiet, said Middle East expert Ophir Zaltzberg from the Herbert C. Kellman Institute. But there are also Hamas leaders outside Gaza, like Salah al-Aruri, who think more in terms of ideology and believe that the strategy should not focus on Gaza, he said. For Palestinian economist Omar Shaban, the reconstruction and development of Gaza cannot depend on donations from foreign companies alone or the work permits granted by Israel. We need a real political process, which will raise the question of recognition of the entity of that which administers Gaza, he said, referring to Hamas, which is branded a terrorist organization by the United States, EU, and Israel. Without that, there will be no change, Shaban told AFP. This, I must say, is an important column for us to read and consider. We need to know what's going on there. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. I'm going to show you 6 cartoons and memes today. The first meme reads, I just got a full tank of gas for $22. Granted, it was for my lawnmower, but I'm trying to stay positive. This is so funny and so sad, so plausible. The gas situation is very harsh and everyone feels it. Next up is a cartoon. We see a couple of who's watching the news, and it shows Russian invasion of Ukraine. The man says, Putin says he's just taking back what used to be Russia. The woman who's reading a history book says, Alaska used to be Russia. History is the perfect foil to use against the crazy Narishkeit we're hearing from Russian apologists. Next is a meme. It's a headline. It's not made up. It's true. CNN Plus was just a bad idea. And this is the headline. CNN Plus struggles to lure viewers in the early days, drawing fewer than 10,000 daily users. The entire escapade, by the way, was just simply embarrassing. CNN could not understand why they failed, and they failed miserably. This next is a classic. 2 police officers are at the scene of a death in a health food store. Someone is crushed by a shelf of organic foods. The scene, we see him lying under the shelf. feet sticking out, and the box of wheat germ at his side. One cop says, "I'm putting down that he died of natural causes." That's funny. This is a cartoon of the children of Israel in the dry shod of the Red Sea as it splits. The caption reads, "If there were cell phones at the Red Sea." Everyone there is, of course, posing for selfies. Finally, a sign from a men's toilet in the Chinese, which reads men's toilet, but the English reads toilet man. The caption reads, "World's worst superhero." I suppose it's true. No child would ever play with an action figure that was called Superman. They want to grow up to be Toilet Man. In a moment, more of my own perspective and a few predictions. Lufthansa has apologized for not allowing Jews on one of their flights. In a statement, the CEO of the airline wrote that Lufthansa regrets the circumstances surrounding the decision to exclude the affected passengers from the flight. He went on to say that the airline regretted that, quote, "the large group was denied boarding rather than limiting it to the non-compliant guests." What Lufthansa was referring to was, of course, the group, which were 100 plus Hasidic Jews, many of whom did not know one another at all. They were flying to Hungary on a pilgrimage to the graves of renowned rabbis. According to the passengers, they were not a group at all. But most of them were Jewish, and they were flying as individuals on Lufthansa. Lufthansa apologized not only for the inconvenience, but also for the offense caused and personal impact. Lufthansa management did not use the word Jews or Jew once, nor did they mention that the only passengers barred from travel were Jews, and very Jewish-looking Jews. Airline employees spoke to the issue, saying that it was the Jewish people who had boarded the plane at JFK were non-mask compliant, and hence they were being punished. During the flight from JFK, the pilot actually admonished passengers and told them there would be consequences for not wearing a mask. And there were. Shame on Lufthansa. Even the apology was insulting. It's called Operation Chariots of Fire. It's the largest military drill in the history of Israel. There won't be a single unit that doesn't take part in this drill, explained IDF spokesman Brigadier General Ron Kochav. Operation Chariots of Fire will involve multi-fronts and real-time decision-making. The operations will involve political leaders, military general staff, of course, thousands and thousands of soldiers will be involved. Tensions in Israel are very high and getting higher with each successful and thwarted terrorist attack. This drill will involve ground, sea, air, forces, and many more. While the IDF spokesman did not mention computers, the most important element in Chariots of Fire will be high-tech responses. For Israel, the most important and dangerous front is now the north. Hezbollah is in possession of upwards of 150,000 rockets, and there needs to be a coordinated Israeli response in the event of an attack. So the stated purpose of the operation, with Chariots of Fire, is to improve coordination and cooperation between IDF government ministries, security organizations, and civilian bodies, including their capabilities to transition from routine to full emergency scenario with multiple areas that are constantly evolving. The multi-front attack is a realistic scenario. Israel needs to be prepared. The Jerusalem Post reported that Israel's Mossad interrupted a triple assassination attempt. The targets were a U.S. general, an Israeli diplomat in Turkey, and a journalist in France. The Mossad arrested the 52-year-old leader of the plot, Mansour Rassouli, in Iran, and interrogated him somewhere. Rassouli gave up the details of the plan and his links with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. He was later released. Rassouli revealed that they were willing to pay contractors $1 million per hit. In a British media outlet, Rassouli now claims that the criminals abducted him. They put a bag over my head and took me to an unknown location. They told me they'd kill me and my family and tortured me severely. They told me I had to say everything they told me. that I was an emissary of the Revolutionary Guards and that I was sent to kill people in Europe and Turkey. There are a lot of credible details in the report Razuli gave to the Mossad. The information sounds incredibly reasonable, especially given that the United States spends $2 million per month protecting former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo because of credible and actionable threats against his life. He's not the only one, by the way. Razuli is working hard to protect himself from reprisal by the notorious Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Leaders from around the world are still attempting to convince Iran to come back to the negotiating table and sign on a new nuclear agreement. The European Union's Iran nuclear coordinator, Enrique Mora, is going to Tehran to meet Iranian negotiator Bagheri Khani. On Twitter, Mora wrote, traveling again to Tehran for meetings with Khani and other officials on the Vienna talks and other issues. Work on closing the remaining gaps of this negotiation continues. Ali Shamkhani, the chair of Iran's powerful Supreme National Security Council, tweeted in Hebrew that the nuclear talks were progressing and were a sign that the strong government and its official ability to deal with the most important matters. Shamkhani was obviously trying to bring home his point to one of the nuclear deal's most outspoken naysayers. Mora has played a crucial role in facilitating negotiations, given that Iran refuses to speak directly to the United States. He has traveled to Tehran in late March before heading to Washington. Iran's Foreign Ministry spokesman, Saeed Khatibzadeh, said Mora would be conveying messages from the signatories to Tehran during his trip. One of Iran's most outrageous demands is that Washington lift its terrorism designation for the Revolutionary Guard. Separately, you should know that the International Atomic Energy Agency has grown increasingly critical of Iran's failure to cooperate and refusal to explain traces of radioactive material at several undeclared nuclear sites. The IAEA director, Mariano Grossi, has repeatedly expressed his frustration. He's quoted as saying, "We, in the last few months, were able to identify traces of enriched uranium in places that we have never been declared by Iran, so we are extremely concerned about this." Grossi added that he's skeptical that officials could close the nuclear deal if the IAEA had unanswered questions. This is not over, and probably won't be over for a while. We're going to watch this for the future. Who knew garbage could be so informative? The Nabatean Roman ancient trading route connected the Mediterranean world with the eastern and southern sources of incense, spices, and other luxury goods, way before one could possibly imagine, stretching from the Levant and Egypt through the northeastern Africa and Arabia to India and beyond. The route was used for 600 years. From 300 BC to 300 CE, archaeological professor from Haifa, Guy Bar Oz, heads the study that excavated ancient rubbish which had accumulated at rest stations along the route. And he says that the research his group conducted did and unveils new information about the trade route. Professor Bar Oz explained, when examining the trade composition, three main trends are recognized. International trade with a central route to Southeast Asia, international trade that connected between sea sources, especially between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, and local trade that acted as an economic belt of the route and provided raw material and food for the merchants along the route. This is way before Marco Polo, you should know. The University of Haifa researchers pursued strategy involving targeted small-scale excavations at ancient middens and garbage dumps and caravanserais along the Petra-Gaza section of the route. Rubbish deposited, rich in ash, organic remains located in the outskirts of the archaeological sites, enabled the researchers to illuminate aspects of the organization of desert trade with wide implications for other ancient trade routes. What a great find. A whale was recently sighted off the coast of Haifa. This is big news also because it was the first whale ever sighted off the coast of Israel. It was a massive sperm whale. The sighting was photographed by a graduate student named Kim Kobu, and so the whale was given the name Kim because the first person to see it was, of course, Kim. Kim was a graduate student and was part of a group of marine scientists, After spotting the whale, the marine scientists contacted their colleagues, hoping of gaining information about this whale that they saw and confirming that the sighting, at least this first sighting here, was actually seen elsewhere also. But no, they are now cataloging this whale and identifying its scars and other indicators. About their namesake, Kim Caboose said, "It's a nice feeling. It's especially exciting that I was part of this study. Most of our lab members have dolphins named after them, but I had the honor of having a sperm whale taking my name." According to Dr. Aviad Shanin, the head of the Apex Predators investigator at the University of Haifa Morris Kahn Marine Research, said the sperm whales are on the verge of extinction in the Mediterranean and their population is in rapid decline. He added, "We hope that our discovery will show that the Haifa area serves as an important habitat for them. We hope that Kim will be the first on a long list of Israeli whales." This is one whale of a story. We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that earlier I used the Yiddish term Narishkeit? I hope you were paying attention to that. It means foolishness, trivial, trivialism. It also means irrelevant. It's slang. It's also a significant word in Yiddish. It has real meaning. The word in Yiddish derives from the medieval German, Narishkeit, or Narishkeit. In modern German, it's Närrischkeit. Närrisch means foolish. That term actually derives from the simple root word nar, which means fool in German. You can take the simple root word and build on it in German and expand it. That's what happens very often in German. In the case of the Yiddish word Narishkeit, it is directly derived from the German word nar, which means, of course, foolish. And like in English, ish means possessing. Okay, that is also the case for Yiddish and German. Now the suffix kite, that suffix is the same as height in German, corresponding to an ism or ness in English. Just taking the word fool, from there getting foolish, and turning what a foolish person does into foolishness. And so you have the derivation of the Yiddish word Narishkeit. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.